Welcome to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, where you get all the latest and greatest Arizona Cardinals news, analysis, insight, and more. My name is Donnie Drew, and joined every week by my co-host Richie Bradshaw. Richie,
That's
we
me.
began our draft profile series last week with Paris Johnson. Talked so highly about him and the things he can do. Moving on to day two, our second round pick, BJ Ojulari, edge rusher out of LSU. Very exciting things and what he could possibly do for the team heading into 2023 and beyond. But before we get into all of that and more, how are you?
I'm good, my friend. It's just another day in paradise, and there's no better day than when I get to sit down with Donnie Druin and talk some football.
You know how to butter me up. I really do appreciate it. Also, quick shout out all the ASU gear in the background. Do you host a podcast for Arizona State
Uh,
football?
I talk about the Sun Devils on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can check it out at Locked On Sun Devils. If you're a Sun Devil fan, and I feel like there's a good amount of Arizona Cardinal fans out there that do care about the Sun Devils, I've been talking a lot about the future lately, and today I'll be talking about the recruits. So, yeah, tune in.
Tune in indeed. So we're going to lock on to BJ Ojulari, the team's second round pick for the Cardinals. And a lot of, I don't want to say lofty expectations, but when you lose a guy like Zach Allen, when you lose a guy like JJ Watt, and even cutting Marcus Golden, you're losing a lot of talent up front in the front seven, especially in terms of getting after the quarterback. The team really didn't do anything in free agency to fix that. Everybody thought Will Anderson Jr. was a possibility for the Cardinals at number three. They took Paris Johnson at 6 after trading back to 12, but in the second round, they satisfied that need with BJ Ojulari. Really quick here before we dive and give our own personal opinion into BJ. Nick Rallis, following the draft, talked very, very highly about what Ojulari can do. He said, on the field ability wise, I love what Ojulari can do in the pass and run game. He's a very versatile dude. I think he's a very natural pass rusher, and you can see his bend, I think, coming off the edge with speed. He could beat you with speed. But as soon as he gets overset, it's not, oh no, what happened? He's very fluid and natural with his counter rushes. And then on top of that, he can stick a long arm in there and work moves off his long arm. As far as his rush ability, he's very versatile and very natural. There's a bit of how natural is this guy rushing off the edge? He's very natural. Then I love the tools that he has in the running game as far as being able to set some violent edges and collapse the edge. That's what we are looking for at that spot. Now, before we get into the player BJ is, something that kept popping up for the Cardinals as I went back and I looked at their draft class and how everything unfolded, Richie, was football character. That was a recurring thing. That was something mentioned a lot, whether that be in the daily recaps by General Manager Monty Austin or just the entire draft recap done by Jonathan Gannon and his two coordinators. They want guys who would be able to come in right away, not only impact things from a football standpoint, but also just a culture standpoint. And we have to remember they're taking over for a 4-13 football team who were in headlines for, it feels like, all of the wrong reasons throughout 2022. It feels like the last 12 months and even up until now, it just feels like anytime the Arizona Cardinals are in the news, it's mostly not for anything good. So I feel like there's a very conscious effort for Jonathan Gannon and company to get guys like BJ Ojulari, who you know those better than anybody, got the coveted number 18 jersey at LSU.
Yeah, and I think that's where we should start our conversation, Donnie, is for those who aren't aware, LSU has two very, very precious numbers to them. They have number 7, which they typically reserve for really, really good defensive backs, and the exception of Leonard Fournette, who ended up becoming an LSU legend. That's a very important number to them. You've seen some guys that have rocked that, like Tyrann Mathieu and Patrick Peterson. But the bigger number here, and the most important number in the history of LSU Tigers football, is number 18. That is a number that is distinctive. It is given to captains on the team who have high character, high ethic, both on the field and off the field as students. They don't hand that number out just willy nilly. You have to earn that number. And BJ Ojulari earned that number. He went through his time. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Georgia. He decides to take his talents down to Baton Rouge. And while he's there, he works hard as a freshman. He starts one game as a freshman. He ends up turning into a full-time starter as a sophomore, grinds his way into being a junior, who again is a full-time starter in the 11 games that he played. But he asserted himself as a leader of men on the football field. This is a high character dude. This is a guy who can be that vocal leader, but also be that passionate guy on the field who leaves it all out there for 60 minutes or 70 minutes, however long he ends up playing. He's giving his all on every down. Whether he's on the field or he's on the sideline, he's hyping his guys up. He's definitely, like I said, a leader of men. And that is absolutely one of the most attractive aspects when you were looking at him as a prospect was you looked at BJ Ojulari and you were like, you know what? I'm trying to rebuild my franchise right now, like the Arizona Cardinals are. This is a dude I want in my locker room. I wouldn't be surprised, Donnie, given the state of the edge rushing room, if BJ Ojulari became the leader of this edge rushing core. It's young guys, it's unproven guys. BJ Ojulari as not a freshman, as a rookie for the Arizona Cardinals could come in here, not only be highly productive from an edge rushing standpoint for what they have, but also be the dude who rallies the troops, who gets everyone together and is able to get the most out of Myjai Sanders, out of Cameron Thomas, out of everybody else that's on this roster. I really, really like Ojulari's prospect as a leader for the Cardinals, even as a rookie, let alone down the road, if he does blossom into the talented player that we believe he is, Donnie. I love this fit for a team that's looking for a new identity, a new culture, a change, and a guy who can provide all of that.
Yeah, and you hear people talk about the whole like high character thing, and you hear that so many times, and it makes sense, right? Like you don't want knuckleheads in your locker room. You don't really want anything negative coming towards your team. But like almost at like a certain point, you're like, okay, but like, how is that going to help on field performance? And I think Jonathan Gannon spoke on that issue after the draft, and he was like, look, like we aimed for the high character guys because more times not they hit their ceiling. And it's just everything clicked after I heard that. I'm like, you know what? Not that, getting those kinds of guys before didn't not help the roster, right? But it's like, okay, well, you know what you're getting off the field. You know what they're going to put in the weight room and in training in the offseason. And, you're willing to put your eggs in that basket that, hey, BJ Ojulari is going to pan out like he should. So obviously the number 18 jersey for LSU, the high character thing, home run. But whenever it comes to on the field, I think BJ, phenomenal player. This is from Richie's draft profile on BJ Ojulari. The link will be in the description below. 2-year full-time starter, 3-year full-time role player, good production in 2 seasons starting, and he has decent size, 6'2", 240-80, but only 34 and 1/4 inch arms, and then 10 and 1/2 inch hands. Richie, when you watched Ojulari, because I think you've watched a lot of these guys more than the average person, be included, what like popped out to you? What made you see, okay, this guy was in first round conversation. He didn't quite go day one, but early day two pick. What makes him that valuable as a guy that the Cardinals saw?
I like his speed, Donnie. And it's funny, his brother's in the league. Aziz Ojulari playing for the New York Giants right now. When Aziz was coming out, we were talking about like this dude is a pure speed rusher, and the ability to bend the edge by his get up and go is what makes him such an enticing prospect. Aziz was also a guy who was flirting with day one possibility, ends up going in the second round. BJ is a carbon copy. Like it's the lazy comparison because they're literally related. But if you only put their last names on their jersey and you gave them the same number and the same jersey, I don't know that you could tell them apart. But BJ's get up and go is great. He has the same ability to bend the edge with his speed. I do like the ability for him to use those complementary skills. And what I would like to see is being able to convert that speed to power. He's got good size at 248, and it's not as though he's lacking in the functional strength department. It's just it doesn't really show too much when he's putting together his pass rushing plan. I think that he needs to refine those skills a little bit, especially when he gets to the pros. And it turns out that offensive tackles are a lot quicker in the NFL than they are in college, even the SEC. Like there's going to be guys who can get up and go very quick, no matter if he's going on the left or right side. There's great tackles on both sides of the offensive line at the pro level. So he's going to need to come up with a more complex pass rushing plan. I want to see him be able to convert that speed to power. Like I said, I want to see some more usage of his hands, but I do think that there's a lot already there for him. It's just a matter of refining it and getting that to the next level. This wasn't an accident that we talked about him as a potential first round pick, Donnie. It's just a matter of taking these attributes and then just taking them to the next level. Getting that completeness out of him is going to get him on the field a lot. Right now, I feel like this is a role player, but for the Arizona Cardinals, they aren't going to have very much choice and are going to have him probably as a full time starter, which isn't a bad thing. The good news is you got Jonathan Gannon, who had 3 edge rushers with 11 or more sacks last year. If there's a guy who's going to be able to develop and get the most out of BJ Ojulari in year 1, let alone down the road, it's Jonathan Gannon.
Yeah, we can get into that in a little bit because we're going to look over the Cardinals' defensive depth chart. But I mean, if there's any team in any year to have a guy like BJ come in, be a full time starter, and just really like hammer home those reps for 2024 and beyond, it's going to be the Arizona Cardinals, and it's going to be this year. Considering how they set themselves up, they're not exactly Lombardi Trophy contenders as we walk into 2023. I mean, there's a very good possibility that thanks to their trade with the Houston Texans, they could probably land 2 top 5 picks going into next year. And that has ramifications far beyond BJ Ojulari that we'll get into on another podcast. But, you really like some of the things you saw out of BJ. I think that the term speed and a bend is probably the most used whenever I read and I watch BJ Ojulari. I mean, it's there, right? Like the ability to get from point A to point B quickly.
He's an
Is there
athlete.
with BJ. But I do want to ask you if he was considered a first round pick, right? And let's take the Cardinals glasses off for a little bit. Why didn't he go first round?
I think that you just had a lot of other talent that pooled up into the first round. You saw a slip on the receivers, but then you had 4 receivers go in a row. You had 3 quarterbacks go in the first round, which pushes some other talent down the board. There were other edge rushers that teams fancied. We saw Will McDonald be a top 15 pick for the New York Jets, and they seem to like that kind of profile. I think if you placed a pew to my head and asked me to tell you why BJ wasn't a first round pick, I think teams might look at him as a bit of an undersized pass rusher who doesn't have the functional strength to be able to be a complete guy at the next level. Whereas the Will Andersons and the Will McDonalds of the world do have more upside, I would say, than BJ. I think that's another thing is I don't, and I'm not going to doubt that he could get there. Again, with Jonathan Gannon, I feel like anything's possible for this kid. But I feel like you looked at those other edge rushers, and it's not just those 2. I just can't think of very many off the top of my head. I don't know that people are going to look at Ojulari as a 20 sack guy or a 15 sack guy or a annual 10 sack guy the way that they look at Will Anderson, who was a slam dunk first round pick, right?
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you because when you look at guys like Will Anderson, like Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, like those guys, you had mentioned in the scouting report, which again down below in the description, go to click on that after you watch this. But you said he was a very safe pick, right? Like he could come in, he could do some good things for you, but like in terms of the ceiling and what he offers, it probably doesn't match up to a guy like Will Anderson, to a guy like Tyree Wilson.
High floor, low ceiling. I think that's what people view Ojulari as. I think that he can come into the league as a 6 sack guy, but again, I think that teams are going to look at him and they're like, but is this a consistent double digit guy compared to the Tyree Wilson, the Lucas Van Ness of those? And I mean, the other thing, BJ Ojulari is a good athlete, but Lucas Van Ness and Tyree Wilson are freaks. And the NFL loves to bet on those freak athletes. And that's one of the reasons that those guys propelled themselves higher than BJ Ojulari did, even without the consistent production that Ojulari put together. Because I think if you compared their college careers, Ojulari has the better complete resume compared to Tyree Wilson, who wasn't hyper productive. But again, you saw those glimpses and you were like, this dude could be Ezekiel Ansah. And you look at Lucas Van Ness and what he could do, and you're like, he did a lot of that in a reserve role, right? BJ was able to do a lot as a full-time starter compared to those guys. So where his box score looked better, the upside of the other two definitely propelled them higher than him, which is why they were both top 20 picks.
Yeah, I think especially in the first round of the NFL draft, this is something you love to say. I think I actually picked this up from you. But teams draft players for what they can become, not what they currently are. And so
Right.
when you take a guy like Tyree Wilson in the top 10, is he as polished as a guy like BJ Ojulari? As a guy like Will Anderson? No, but I mean, if you can get the most out of him and maximize his potential, you're talking about something out of this world. You're talking
Top 10
miles
in the
air.
league.
Yeah, you're talking crazy stuff. And when you look at BJ Ojulari, it's like, okay, he's a very, very good player, but exactly where is the ceiling and how far away is that from his already very high floor? But I don't think you can deny him. You're getting a player from day one who already has a pretty high floor, great football character. You don't have to worry about him. You're just kind of banking on, okay, can he get in the weight room? Can he start to expand his tree a little bit just in terms of what he could do both in run and pass support? And I think if you look at his PFF grades here, 83 pass rush grade, 70.9 run defense grade. I mean, he's hitting all of the marks here, right? And just in terms of the nerds who sit behind computer screens and grade football plays. He's also a very versatile dude. He showed the ability to rush between the left and the right side of the line. And I think in the Jonathan Gannon defense, sorry, Nick Rallis defense, Gannon claims he's not going to
There's a lot of
interfere.
fingerprints on that
Yeah,
defense from
yeah. Like
Jonathan Gannon.
Rallis is defensive coordinator, but I think Gannon will definitely have a major influence in what happens there. They're very anti put me in a box, right? Like we're a 3-4, we're a 4-3, whatever. I think he'll be able to be used on either side of the ball, and I think that's going to be a very, very good thing as the Cardinals kind of figure out what he exactly is in their defense and what he can be moving forward.
100% agree. And I do like that you brought up the ability to be a comfortable rusher from both the left and right side. I feel like when we talk about offensive tackles, that makes a lot of sense. But I feel like when we talk about edge rushers, people don't attribute that same thought process about switching to a different side of the line. There's a lot of different things that go into that. First of all, you now have two different built offensive tackles. You typically have the big boulder sized right tackle, and you have another solid sized guy, but the more finesse guy on the left side. Having to adjust to that in between downs, let alone just a transition from one year to another, having to do that on a consistent basis requires a pass rusher to develop those different plans, have different counter moves, have different ideas and overall thought processes on how they're going to get to the quarterback. These offensive tackles aren't the same on both sides of the line. So for BJ Ojulari to have that comfortability to rush off the left side or rush off the right side, or maybe even the Cardinals get creative and blitz him up the middle or something like that, that's a really, I'll just say it, it's a very sexy attribute when you're looking at a pass rusher, is that ability to be flexible. It's one of the things that has made guys like TJ Watt so successful, is his ability to come off of both sides compared to some other role play pass rushers. I can't think of any specific examples, but there's guys who are just simply limited to one side of the line. That's not a bad thing, but it's something that is a very underrated aspect when you're looking at your pass rushers, is their ability to be comfortable blitzing from anywhere along the defensive front. So for Ojulari to have that comfortability, that's just another reason that we talk about him as a high floor player, Donnie. He's already got a lot in his toolbox. It's just a matter of refining it to the pro level.
Yeah, and underrated indeed, because when you look at a typical NFL offensive line, normally there's one good solid tackle, and then there's another kind of whatever. Very rarely do teams have two outstanding, phenomenal tackles on the left and right side. Let's say BJ Ojulari emerges as Arizona's number one pass rusher. The ability for Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis to deploy him on whatever offensive tackle is weaker, and it also helps with keeping the offensive coordinator guessing in terms of game planning for where Ojulari is going to be at. I mean, in order for them to having that ability to put Ojulari as that kind of chess piece as a
Right.
pass rusher along the front seven, dude, it'll be so fun. to watch them deploy him if he is indeed kind of using that role. But at least that option is there, right?
Yes. And the one thing that we call those kind of people in the industry, Donnie, we call them game wreckers and we call them matchup nightmares. When you have guys like BJ Ojulari that give you more than one thing, it's something that defense or offensive coordinators are going to sit up and they're like, man, we got to find a way to protect for BJ Ojulari. We're going to find a way to chip him with tight ends or running backs or fullbacks or whatever. We're going to design quarterback bootlegs to get him out of whatever side BJ is rushing off of. You're just going to have to make sure that with a guy that's versatile and refined like BJ Ojulari is coming into the league, let alone once he continues to be refined and get to that next level, teams are just going to have to prepare for Ojulari.
No, for sure. And we talked a lot about Ojulari and what he can do and him potentially becoming Arizona's number one pass rusher. Very long time for him to kind of settle his feet into the league. That's something that hopefully will happen down the road, but I don't want any expectations placed on him right away in 2023. But there is going to be ample opportunity for him to emerge as Arizona's number one pass rusher in 2023. I mean, you look at the competition with him, Myjai Sanders and Cameron Thomas, who admittedly didn't see a ton of playing time last year. I feel like both of those guys kind of flashed what they were able to do. If you're making me pick one guy over another, I'm probably going to lean Cam Thomas at this point. I don't think that's a negative connotation on Myjai. But I think
the opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really like Myjai's profile.
Interesting. I think we need to do a position battles podcast ahead of training.
You should bookmark that idea, and we can break it down bit by bit. That sounds like fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. But just in terms of where Ojulari is on the depth chart, dude, there's going to be so much opportunity for him because there's not like a solidified set in stone starter, whether you lean Cam Thomas, whether you lean Myjai Sanders, and you even look at the other guys too, like Victor Dumikije, Dennis Gardeck, like Jesse Lukita. Like those are not names that make me super confident that Ojulari isn't going to see the field.
Collier.
LJ Collier. Ugh. But like even then, I don't think BJ is gonna put his hand to dirt and be used as like a defensive end in the NFL. I don't know, man. I think there's
for him.
Yeah, and there's just so many different things you can do with him. The talent is there, the floor is there, the high character football, all that good stuff. That's all there. The opportunity is going to be there. Do you have any closing thoughts on BJ Ojulari? Because it seems like Arizona, the Cardinals talk like they got a steal for him in the second round. I'm not sure steal would be the right word in my eyes, but it looks to be like they got a very, very good football player, somebody you don't have to worry about outside of the facility, a guy who can come in and contribute right away while also kind of building his profile for the future as well.
Right. I think the biggest takeaway for Cardinal fans is to understand this isn't a defensive rookie of the year candidate. This isn't a guy who you should expect massive production year one. If he gets you 5 sacks as rookie, you should be very happy with that. If he's a guy who can start 10 plus games, you should be very happy with that. If this is a guy who can play 60% of the snaps, you should be very happy with that. Make sure you temper your expectations. He was a second round pick for a reason. This is a guy that they want to develop and eventually become a full-time role player for the team. So make sure that you understand that, and this goes for every Cardinals rookie that's coming in and the rookies next year. These are guys that need time in a rebuilding franchise right now, but also understand that there's plenty of reason to be excited for BJ Ojulari. So while I tell you temper your expectations, I also tell you to really think about how exciting he is as a prospect to be able to take that next step as a player.
All right, that just about does it. That wraps up our rookie profile on BJ Ojulari. Paris Johnson down, BJ Ojulari down. Garrett Williams is up next. I'm really excited to get into him because he can be something. I think you can argue that he has a higher ceiling.
Talk about steals? That's a steal.
But plenty of time ahead for us to talk about that. For Richie Bradshaw, I am Donnie Druin. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Go ahead and follow our work at allcardinals.com or si.com/NFL/Cardinals. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter at RichieBrads36, at Donnie Druin. Until next time, We'll see you.